Africa, the world's second largest and second most populous continent after Asia. It has an overall population of about 1.5 billion people, with many, many stories to cover. Today I'm going to talk to a journalist and producer who's traveled the world and reported from 15 countries. And recently, he's focused his attention and energy on streaming stories about Africa, in particular, the country of Sudan. This is Sobh, and I'm your host, Hassan Tavakoli. Ahmed Kaballo is a young journalist and dedicated reporter whose social media skills have led him to create his own Africa-based media platform that sports an anti-colonialist motto, with the lions, not the hunters. He believes African media is a key tool in reshaping the continent's narrative that would then represent a more nuanced and balanced view of Africa. Ahmed Kaballo, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, first of all, tell us more about yourself and more about the line of the work you do.
Sure. So I'm a journalist. I've been a journalist for about 10 years now. I actually made my bones working for Press TV. I covered many different regions of the world for Press TV, and they basically gave me my wings so that I could fly. So I went to Nicaragua, did a documentary there, did 2 from Venezuela, 2 from Sudan. I went to Iraq and did some filming and reports there, as well as many reports from places like Ireland, Italy, Netherlands, all over Europe.
How was this experience?
It was great. It was great. You know, when you travel somewhere on holiday and you stay in a little holiday resort, you're limited to that holiday resort experience. You speak to other people, maybe from the same country as you, but when you go out and go there via work, then you really speak to real people and get a real feeling what it's like on the ground there.
And so how do you manage life as a journalist, balancing work and your personal life?
Yeah, it's challenging. This trip to Iran, and I went to Eritrea recently. I now have a small boy. My small boy doesn't understand when I'm going away. So my wife tells me he goes to find me around the house. He's going to all the different rooms. So that's obviously challenging.
How old is he?
He's 20 months. He's 20 months, yeah. So she sent me a video of him holding my passport photo, saying Baba, which is, makes me miss him a lot more. So it's a lot more difficult now. I've got a child, sorry. But it's also very rewarding. When I meet an Iranian now outside the country, I can say, I've been to your country. I've been to Tehran. I went to the Aerospace Museum, took some pictures there. I went to the cinema and saw a film about Rumi. So it really helps to break barriers. The amount of people I meet from Iraq in the UK, and I tell them I've been to Iraq, and they're second generation Iraqi and never been. So it really helps break barriers and helps to bring you together with different communities when you've visited different places in the world.
Yeah, it does. And it's interesting, I've talked to different journalists about how they balance their life before, starting a family. And doing journalism after the family, it's really challenging, yeah.
It really is, yeah, it really is. I think when he gets older, when he's about 7, 6, I can explain.
Yeah.
Going for a week, I'll be back in a week. I'm going to bring you a nice big toy from Iran or Eritrea. But at the moment, there's not that. I can't explain it, and I think that's where the difficulty lies.
Indeed, yeah. Well, you're the CEO and founder of a social media-based news network called African Stream, which, as its name indicates, focuses on all things Africa. How much has this channel been able to educate the people of the world about what's happening in the African continent?
Yeah, greatly, and you can see that by the growth. In a very short period of time, we've accumulated over 730,000 followers on Instagram, over 800,000 followers on TikTok, and that's because I feel Africa as a continent is probably the most misunderstood continent in the world. Many people, even progressive people, think that before the Europeans set foot in Africa, there was nothing there. We were swinging on trees. And a lot of the film and literature and movies and series have only contributed to that perception. So what we've done is we try to break down some of these myths. So that's what we do when we focus on the history. We don't just talk about the European did this, the European did that. We actually talk about the kingdoms that we have. The kingdom of Kush that we have in Sudan. We have King Tahaka, who's referenced in the Bible. Kingdom of Kush had irrigation systems that influenced the Greeks and the Romans. So we try to also explain the positive stories about Africa, and actually we have the solutions within our own history for our future development. But also, Africa's covered a lot by the mainstream media. I just think it's covered very badly. They tell a story and completely decontextualize it. So the person that doesn't know the nuances will be left with a certain perception. An example of that would be the Niger coup. So there was a coup that happened in Niger. The way the Western mainstream media covered it was military men have just taken power. We had somebody on the ground in Niamey, spoke to people. People were filling up stadiums. There were people lining up the streets of Niamey supporting this coup. The reason is because they recognize that since its independence, Niger has been a neo-colonial relationship with France. It was at the time of the coup, the second poorest country in the world. According to the World Bank, it's expected to grow by 12.8% this year. So that just shows that actually when you decolonize and you take the resources that lie beneath the ground back into the hands of the masses, you can see real development. And we just tried to provide some of that context and explain why there were people out in the streets of Niamey supporting this coup.
How much competition do you have, when it comes to media? African Stream, you have your own, line of work, your own mentality, okay, how to cover the stories, okay, what to cover. How fierce is the competition, media related?
In Africa, I'd say not very fierce at all, because there's not many.
So that means you're one of the very few channels that try to focus on the truth that's happening there?
Yes, from an anti-imperialist Pan-African perspective, that is critical, very critical. So we don't take a Human Rights Watch report on face value. We investigate, we do some digging, we go speak to the people on the streets. Some of these other African media outlets, they just regurgitate what the mainstream media is saying. So even though it's got Africa in its name, it's essentially controlled by the same centers of power from London, Brussels, Washington, as the rest of the mainstream media. So that's why we say there isn't much competition, and that's why people are flooding to our platforms.
There's not much competition, but there's great responsibility.
Yes,
yeah,
exactly.
In making things clear.
Exactly. And we do take feedback. Sometimes we'll take on board some of the feedback. If we get it wrong, we'll put our hands up and say, we got this story wrong. Doesn't happen very often, but I think it's important that we have that type of transparent relationship with our audience. Pan-Africanism is about building a mass movement. It's not top up, it's bottom up. So the masses has to inform the content that we're creating. Sometimes we stick to our guns and the audience follows us. So in Niger, for example, the first week or so when we were reporting it, people were saying, I can't believe you're supporting these military men. But now when we post about Niger, the whole audience has come along with us because we've just broken it down. Scientifically, academically, we've broken it down, and they've stuck with us in the journey, and now they're on our side of the narrative.
Indeed. And how much has this channel and your work been able to connect the African diaspora together?
Yeah, amazing. I mean, I'm a big fan of hip-hop music. Some of the rappers I listened to as a child follow us, send us DMs. Yasin Bey, who's formerly known as Mos Def, a big rapper. He's got songs with Jay-Z. He's got songs with Kanye West. He's a huge rapper. He sent us a DM, a direct message.
He sent
us a DM on African Stream saying, I follow your channel and I tell everybody I know to follow you. And it's just like, whoa, Kyrie Irving, the basketball player, NBA basketball player, one of the best players. Some people put him down as a future Hall of Famer. He shares our stories.
Tells us a lot.
Macklemore, who's just made this anthem for Palestine, he sent us a DM saying, keep up the good work. So the diaspora is definitely connected. And the reason why they're connected is because we don't create this distinction. We'll do a story about Cameroon right next to a story about police brutality in the US, because that is what Pan-Africanism is. It's connecting African people all over the world and understanding we have a shared struggle, and actually only way we can overcome that struggle is if we unite.
And that's the way to go in terms of bringing back self-confidence to Africans all over the world, okay, which the West has sucked out of them.
Exactly. Yeah, I mean that's why we put so many historical posts. It's not many, but enough because part of the colonization process, much like the colonization process happens in Palestine right now, is you tell a lie. So in Palestine, they said, it's a land without a people, which is not true, yeah? And it's used to justify the settler colonial project. In Africa, they say, we're bringing civilization. The premise of that is there was no civilization before. So an important part in building people's confidence is showing them, here's this civilization that existed in Zimbabwe. Here's this civilization that existed in Benin, in Nigeria. Here's this civilization that existed in Eritrea, in Ethiopia, in Sudan, in Central African Republic. And just you know, using academic sources. People want sources, we always provide it to them. Just breaking it down and re-establishing that confidence that the colonizer attempt to strip away.
Okay, Ahmed, we'll be back with you after this very short break. Stay tuned.
After decades of sanctions and financial isolation, many in Sudan had hoped the revolution would bring better economic days ahead. Yet for Washington, it wasn't that simple, and they would demand more, a lot more, before they began loosening the noose. The Republic of Sudan is in a transitional period, with many hoping that the process can lead to a democratically elected government. The question on many people's minds is, what role will the Saudis and the Emiratis have on Sudan's foreign policy going forward? Will Sudan continue to support the Saudi-led war on Yemen? Will a future democratic state reverse the normalization of ties with Israel? These questions remain unanswered as long as the revolution remains unfinished.
Well, you're from Sudan, okay? And as a Sudanese, first of all, could you walk us through what's taking place in Sudan and what's the problem that's preventing peace there?
Yeah, it's a very complex issue, but to simplify it, we had a revolution, end of 2018, 2019. The process was to remove a dictator, Omar al-Bashir, from power. I argue that the army co-opted that revolution. So what they did was they removed the head of the military, thinking that the people would accept the military dictatorship. So, you know, people struggled against the military dictatorship. There was a massacre that happened. There was a sitting that was happening to remove the person that they replaced Bashir with. At the military site, there was a massacre of around 190 people, many of them thrown into the River Nile. And then the people who are unarmed came to the negotiation table with the military. And there would be this 2-year transition. In this 2-year transition, the military still controlled the shots. The military normalized relations with Israel during this period. It's still, one of the first acts of the military council was to continue its commitment of sending troops to the Saudi-led war in Yemen. It's only once the Saudi-led war in Yemen ended that Sudanese troops came home. And within the military, there has now been a jostle for power between two military figures. Burhan, who runs the Sudanese Armed Forces, and Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, aka Hemeti, who runs the Rapid Support Forces. Now, the Rapid Support Forces was created essentially to quell an uprising in Darfur, but beyond that, it was to protect Bashir from his army men. So he thought if he had this private military, the army would never overthrow him in a coup. He didn't foresee that the army and the militia would join forces to overthrow him in the coup. And then in this transitional period, which many Sudanese experts and analysts would say nothing really was achieved in the transitional period, the civilian leaders kind of were co-opted in many ways. However, one thing that they tried to do is they set up a commission to dismantle the Sudanese economy from the old guard, because the military controlled all of the industries, agriculture, import, export, cereal exports, everything. And then the militia controlled the gold mines in the country. So what the committee tried to do was find out who controls what and get them to disentangle their relationship with Sudan's economy. Now that is when both of these guys were like, this is going too far. This little transitional play thing is starting to affect our money. That's when they did a coup against Hamdok, the transitional civilian prime minister, removed him from power, came back to power, but then he resigned. And then these guys themselves have now been fighting it out with different foreign powers backing each one. So the UAE supports the Rapid Support Forces. All of the gold that Sudan has doesn't get exported legally. It gets exported through the black market, and most of it ends up in Dubai, where people go and buy all these fancy bracelets and earrings and necklaces and whatnot. And then in the Sudanese army is supported by the Egyptian army, and some say, although it's not being verified, some say that it has some sort of Israeli and Saudi support as well. So this is essentially turning into what people call a proxy war between different powers in the region. Sudan is strategically placed on the Red Sea, next to the Gulf of Aden, and as you know, all of the countries in that area are in some sort of geopolitical conflict or hot conflict. We have Yemen, which has just come out of a conflict. We have Eritrea, which is sanctioned to the hilt. We have Ethiopia, where most of the country is out of the government's control. We have Egypt, which has the largest funded army in the whole of Africa. So all of these places are of huge strategic interest to imperialist and global powers. And Sudan is the biggest of all those countries. So you can imagine the amount of interest there is in securing Sudan.
You pointed to relations between Sudan and Israel, okay? And there's a documentary you've made on Sudan's relationship with Israel. Let's take a sneak peek of this documentary.
On October 23rd, 2020, Sudan shocked the world by agreeing to normalize relations with Israel, a long-time nemesis for over 50 years. Less than 2 years after Sudan's popular revolution, the question on many people's minds was how and why did we get to this point?
עוד מדינה ערבית שמצטרפת למעגל השלום.
And there you have Netanyahu saying another Arab country joins peace.
Yes.
I mean, first of all, walk us through that documentary and
Sure.
what you're trying to investigate, yeah.
Sure. So Sudan for Israel is very symbolic because in 1967 there was a conference that happened in Khartoum called the Khartoum Conference, where the three no's were established. No peace, no recognition, no normalization. So by getting Sudan to normalize was an important part of Trump's Abraham Accords. We know that Saudi Arabia wants to normalize relations with Israel. But what Saudi Arabia's goal is if you can get all the other countries to normalize first, then it doesn't seem as big a deal that the custodian of Mecca and Medina also normalizes relations. So they put huge pressure on Pakistan to normalize relations with Israel, and that was a small part, but part of the removal of Imran Khan from the Pakistani premiership. Now, what was interesting about the documentary is I interviewed the information minister, who's also the transitional government spokesman, and he gave the most honest and frank interview. To my surprise, actually, I was like, you sure you want me to keep this stuff in? Yeah. But he basically said, in the lead up to the 2020 elections, the Trump administration put immense pressure on Sudan to normalize relations with Israel. Yeah, before that, it was going slowly, but what Trump wanted it as an election kind of, this is one of the things that I've achieved. Yeah. So they said to them, if you want Sudan to be lifted off the state sponsor of terror, you have to normalize relations with Israel. Yeah. Before that, the conditions were different. It was distance yourself from Iran, which until the war on Yemen, 2013, 2014, it had pretty good relations with Iran. They wanted to completely distance themselves from Iran, was one of the conditions. Pay back 9/11 victims' compensation, because Osama bin Laden was in Sudan before 9/11, many years, but he was also a US CIA asset before 9/11. So why doesn't the US pay compensations for itself? But it's a story for another day. So they were the main things before the election as the main conditions to normalize relations. And then as the elections came up, they said, no, you have to make normalization a top priority. And at the time, the Sudanese economy was free falling. So the Sudanese minister explained to me, we took this decision to normalize relations because we needed a lifeline in Sudan, an economic lifeline, just to survive. Otherwise, millions of people were going to go hungry. And if we were to wait for an election and Biden to come through, the new US administration might do a fact-finding mission that takes 8-9 months and then come to the same conclusion that you have to normalize. So they thought, why don't we just do it now? It was surprising to me because one of the things a military dictatorship does is it depoliticizes the youth. It takes the political consciousness from the youth. Because one of the things I found in my documentary, the older generation, people of my Jan's generation, were disgusted by the idea of normalization with Israel.
And that's it. I mean, how well did it sit with the people?
Yeah, I mean, there was definitely a generational divide. So people of my dad's generation, slightly younger, 40s and above, were disgusted. They were, they remember the stories of Abdel Nasser trying to defeat the Zionist entity and the Sudanese listening to their radio stations for updates to see, has Palestine been liberated again? It was part and parcel of their education. But the younger generation, because Omar al-Bashir, he basically, like many Islamic leaders, regimes, they use Palestine whenever they need to kind of get popularity, kind of boost by the population. But they don't really support Palestine. Not the same way that Iran does, not the same way that, say, Venezuela does, or now the Ansar Allah Houthi movement does. It's lip service. So because Bashir used to play lip service to the Palestinian liberation movement, the young people thought, well, this guy supported Palestine, we're anti this guy. So, Palestine isn't that important to us. Not all, but more than I expected.
It's interesting. I mean, because one should be more expectant of the younger generation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. And I'd say the genocide now that's happening in Gaza, I follow a lot of Sudanese pages. Many of them are supporting the Palestinian cause. I don't think any of them supported the Zionist entity, but they thought, well, if this is going to help us improve our economic situations, then it's a pill worthy of swallowing.
So basically, it was an economic thing.
Yes. Yeah. And one of the interviews I did with Anya Parampil from the Grey Zone, she titled it perfectly on YouTube, How the US Bullied Sudan into Normalizing Relations with Israel. That just sums it up.
Okay, stay with us here on Sobh. We'll be right back.
That this wall that commemorates the revolution and the martyrs is here opposite Khartoum's biggest police club, where officers who brutalised protesters would come to relax after their shift was over. The wall has been painted over several times by security forces, yet it reappears, demonstrating that the resistance and what it represents cannot be erased.
And speaking of Palestine, I mean, there's been, unprecedented wave of protests and, in support of Palestine across the world, especially in London, where you were as well. What was it about October 7th, 2023 that, literally ignited this, Because literally the world was something before October 7th, it was something else after it.
I think we're used to Israel decimating the Gaza Strip every 2 to 3 years. But the scale of this genocide has shocked many people. And the fact that everyone can essentially become a journalist by taking out their phone and videoing. And we've seen some footages that's come out of Gaza that I don't think I'll ever forget in my life. You know, fathers trying to speak to the corpse of their children under the rubble. There was one video that stuck with me of a doctor who had to amputate his child's leg without anaesthetic, and the child died from the pain. Yeah. And then all the doctors came around and consoled him. You know, this is something that we've never seen before. In all the other genocides that's happened in the world, and there's been many, we've never seen it
at
in
this scale, this level, yeah.
4K, filmed by regular people. And I think that has just ignited something in people's hearts that say, I can't just sit here while this is happening. And when my grandchildren ask me about it, I say, well, sorry, I had a 9-to-5 job, so I wasn't able to do anything about it. People feel obliged and feel like this is actually a moment in history where it's time to stand up or not.
You know, and there's a video of you at one of these pro-Palestine demonstrations in London. Let's take a look at it. Yeah.
I think what makes it particularly difficult this time is the way the Muslim nations, the Arab nations, are sold out to the Israeli cause. I'm from Sudan. I'm proud of being Sudanese. To see Sudan normalize relations with Israel while Israel is doing this, well, it's attacking Al-Aqsa, the third holiest site for Muslims, while people from Brooklyn are evicting people from their homes and saying, if it's not me, it'll be somebody else, supported by the Israeli judicial system, supported by the Israeli army, supported by the Israeli police, supported by those in Downing Street, those in the White House, those major Western governments who talk about freedom of press, who talk about human rights, yet they couldn't give a damn about human rights when it comes to Palestinians, because whether they know it or not, they do not value the lives of Palestinians because they support the Israel Settle Colonial Project because it serves their interest.
Very vocally vibrant there. And of course with the Palestinian attire.
Thank you. I look a lot younger. I must have aged.
When was that?
That was...
Must have been recent though.
No. I think it was 2 years ago. This was, I think, when they were attacking people in Al-Aqsa Mosque. Yeah. So this wasn't, this is before the most recent genocide.
If that was the case of 2 years ago, just imagine.
Yeah.
What are protests like nowadays in London? Just give us a feel of the atmosphere there. Compared to the past, compared to before October 7th,
Yeah, it's difficult because I now live in Nairobi, Kenya.
Oh.
So I have friends that have been, so I can give you a second-hand account. So for one, they were a lot bigger. What happened for a short period of time, protests for Palestine were huge, and then the Zionist lobby tried to convince people that anyone that goes on these protests were anti-Semitic. So the typical, accountant that has a moral conscience was scared off going. The typical teacher was scared off going. But then the genocide happened and people were like, you can call me whatever you want. You can call me anti-Semitic. I'm going to these protests, yeah? So then they changed the mode of attack and they said, these are all terrorist supporters. So they don't call us anti-Semitic no more. They call us all terrorist supporters. So there's now people on these protests that are there working for the Zionist entity, trying to take a picture of any sign, and they'll use that one picture to try to discredit the whole protest. Even though on the protest, there's Jews, there's young people, there's old people, all ethnicities. You see white people, black people, Asian, Cuban, any ethnicity you'll see there. And people see this as actually the vanguard of the international revolution. So you see people there with Cuban flags at a Palestine protest because they think the same entity that is opposing them is also opposing us in Cuba. Every year, the UN General Assembly has a vote to end the blockade in Cuba. There's 2 countries that vote against it. United States, I'm sure you can guess the other one, Israel. So, this is, once the Palestinians are liberated and the Israelis are defeated in Palestine, it will be a trickle-down effect on the rest of the people that are struggling against their own oppression in their own country.
And that's it. Just imagine, Israel will be gone, okay? What would that spell for the rest of Western colonies?
I think it would strike fear in the hearts of the colonizers. It really will. in, I think it was 1979, Mugabe and the ZANU PF defeated the white settler regime in Rhodesia, modern-day Zimbabwe. That struck fear in the hearts of the apartheid regime in South Africa. And that's why they went to fight in Angola to defend the apartheid regime there. And that's why Cubans went to Angola to fight the apartheid regime in South Africa, because they realized this is all part of the international revolution. And that's why at this conference that I've been invited to, you'll see people of all ethnicities. We have Dan Cohen, American Jewish guy, who's here supporting the Palestinian cause. We have an Irish comedian, Catholic, supporting the Palestinian cause. You have me of Sudanese origin. We have a Syrian, half Syrian, half Russian journalist here supporting the Palestinian cause. All of us understand that these causes are interlinked. And actually the only way that we defeat them is the same way they oppress us. They unite to oppress us. NATO is a unity of former colonial powers and current imperialist states. Yeah, so they unite to defeat us. Why can't we unite to defeat them?
I mean, that's it, yeah. And speaking about colonialism, I mean, going back to the history, I mean, why is it that a rich continent like Africa should fall victim to such colonialism?
I think it's the problem of abundance, yeah? In the UK, I've lived in the UK, there's nothing there. Nothing grows there, there's no resources there. When you have no resources in your own land, there's an incentive to go out and get it from somewhere else. Now in Africa, we have everything. We have the Congo Basin, the second largest rainforest in the world. We have the River Nile, or Congo River. We have diamonds, oil, zinc, aluminium, lithium, all the resources you can think of. We have mangoes that grow on the tree that you can just walk up and pluck them. We have farmland, fertile land. In the Congo, we have some of the most fertile land in the world. Yeah, the Congo should be the richest country in the world, but yet it's one of the poorest. Because when you have things, it means that you don't feel the need to pick up arms and go invade. People don't know, but Mansa Musa, who was a king from Mali, he became the king after his brother set sail to the Americas. So there's a lot of actual evidence that Africans reached the Americas before, hundreds of years before Christopher Columbus, but it's not recognized because we didn't go there and genocide and kill all the natives. And there's a good chance that we went there, settled, intermarried, respected local customs,
explore the whole continent.
Yeah, integrated into those customs, and that's the end of the history. History only remembers some of the most horrific and violent acts. So Christopher Columbus is remembered, and you have Christopher Columbus Day because he went there and killed off the natives of their land.
Yeah.
Massacred them. After he was trying to go to India, thank God for the Indians' perspective that he didn't reach there as well.
Otherwise, God could imagine, what would happen there.
Exactly. So I think that's the reason why Africa was colonized and wasn't a colonizer.
And indeed, I mean, as you said, European countries, they were literally poor before invading Africa.
Yes.
And so just imagine, all the wealth they've stolen, if that is given back to the African continent, just what would remain of the Europeans?
It would bankrupt them. There was a French president. I always get him mixed up. It was either Hollande or the one before him, Chirac. He said, without the business arrangements that we have with Africa, we would be a third world country. So he knows that actually, as part of their survival, they need to keep this uranium deal that they had in Niger, where Areva, a French-backed company, takes 96% of the royalties. So, yeah, they realize that their existence, the status that their civilians have, that their elites have, relies on the exploitation, not just Africa, but primarily Africa, and generally the global South.
And well, this is some sort of colonialism anyway, okay, in a soft way. What is it that sustains such colonialism?
That's a very good question. I think ideology is number one. We saw it in the Russia-Ukraine conflict. In the way that they talked about it, we saw these clips of people saying, it's blue-eyed people like me that are being killed in Ukraine, which, you know, the premise of that is it's okay when it happens in Palestine, it's okay when it happens in Sudan, in Somalia. So there's an ideology, and I think one thing that people say about slavery, which they're right on, everyone enslaved everyone, that's true. Slavery exists in all different societies. The problem with what they call the transatlantic slave trade, which I call the European slave trade, because the Atlantic Ocean never colonized, never enslaved anyone. You know, it's very, the language they use is very clever. Yeah, they call it the when they refer to the Arab slave trade, they call it the Arab slave trade, but when it's European, it's transatlantic, removing the culprit. But anyway, the biggest issue with that isn't that they enslaved Africans. Like I said, all people enslaved, is that they created a lie to justify the enslavement of Africans. So these people in the United States Constitution, I think it's still there, I'm not sure, they say that we are 3/5 of a human being. Yeah, we're not, we're you know, there was eugenesis used to justify it, Darwinism, that we're, you know, we're one off the ape.
So what you're saying is that this dehumanization
Yes.
is what sustains this colonialism.
Exactly. So the dehumanization in its modern form is racism.
And we have the Israelis calling God knows what, the Palestinians.
Exactly, exactly.
Yeah.
And the Palestinians are obviously of a darker hue than these Israelis that come from Austria,
Yeah.
that come from Poland, that come from New York.
Yeah.
There's that one famous clip of the colonizer where the woman's like, why are you taking my house? It's like, if it's not me, it'll be someone else. Like, what's the problem here? It's, you know, you wouldn't speak to somebody that way if you saw them as your equal. And, you know, we're all children of God. We're all equal, but some have been manipulated to think they're superior to others. And that's what justifies and sustains colonialism. Otherwise, the people wouldn't have it. The governments and their populations wouldn't able to go somewhere, invade their country, take over their oil fields like we've seen in Iraq, if they didn't think the Iraqis are less than British people, American people.
So Ahmed, how much has Africa been able to recover from the injuries it received during colonialism?
I think it's in the process of recovering at the moment. I think there are 3 revolutionary states leading the way. That is Mali, Burkina Faso, and Niger. They're forming an alliance of Sahelian states, which would bring their GDPs together, would bring their security arrangements together. And this is what we advocate for, that actually, as we operate as atomized individual states, the imperialists and neocolonialists are just going to pick us off and pit us against one another. Unity is our key. So why I say they're leading the way is because they're going through a process of decolonization. Yeah, in Mali, they're elevating local languages instead of just French, because what they realize is most of the population doesn't even speak French. The elites do and the middle class do, but the masses, they speak the local languages. Why are we disempowering our young population who could be an asset to us? They've kicked out France 24. They've kicked out some of the French radio stations. They've kicked out French NGOs, which they realized are not non-government organization, but actually an appendix of the French imperialist state. And all of these countries, are GDPs growing. So it should be a lesson for other countries that actually, once you untangle yourself from these systems of domination, it's not economic peril that awaits you, but economic prosperity. So we are going through the process of that. Much more is needed. I reside in Kenya. Kenya is a neo-colonial puppet state. At the moment, it's sending troops to Haiti on behalf of the United States. The United States realizes sending American troops to Haiti is a bad look, especially in this social media age.
Gives them a bad face.
Yeah, it gives them a bad face. So what we need is a black face of imperialism. You send black guys to go die, they die, they don't come back in body bags to New York or the United States. They come
Which
back
takes away the domestic protest.
Exactly. They come back in body bags to Nairobi. Nobody cares. Bob's your uncle. Everybody's happy. So Kenya is leading the way. Kenya has also condemned Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. When most of the African masses throughout the continent are excited by this, especially by the young leader Ibrahim Traoré, who's I think he's the youngest leader in the world. I think he's 35, like my age, leading the country. It's just, mind-blowing. And yeah, I feel like with the advent of social media and platforms like African Stream and Press TV and Telesaur and other platforms, people are starting to wake up. So the first thing to do is to liberate the mind, and the rest will follow. And that's what Mali, Burkina Faso and Niger are trying to do.
And it's done through media, as you're doing as well.
Yes.
Yeah. What would your message be to the younger generation Africans who want to follow your line of work to do what you do?
Yeah, I mean, you can try join organizations like African Stream, but also we're in a unique time where you don't even need to be part of African Stream or Press TV to make a difference. You have this device in your pocket that is your window to the world, yeah? You can go out and film things, you can go out and report things, and wake up people around you.
Portable broadcast media technologies
Exactly.
with you. Yeah.
There was one African woman in France the other day, one single African woman, so brave. I'd love to find her online. She went to a far-right fascist protest, videoed them, and said, was videoing these and go, look, these guys are doing Nazi salutes. Yet here in France, Palestine protests are banned. That one video has gone absolutely viral. One woman, she's probably not a journalist, saw something, got out her phone and went to work. And I'd really encourage everybody to do that. Use your phone to tell that narrative that the mainstream, the corporate media don't want us to know.
And that all depends on liberating the mind.
Yes, exactly.